is the way we can go about doing that. And so let's take a trip down the lane of what Agile marketing kind of looks like. So the first stop is personas. The idea of persona is something we've known about for a while. You take a few demographics and psychographics and pain points and bring them in and say, this is our target customer, or this is our target audience member, this is an influencer. And during that time, you make up everything. You guess. You say, oh yeah, they're this type of person and this vertical and these other problems. And that's why they usually fail. It's because we made up everything. It has no value to us because it's not real, and we stop using them. But in an Agile world, we need things like LinkedIn Sales Navigator that let us find people that are in those demographics. We need lists of those people that we can interact with, that we can ask them what their problems are. And we need litmus tests to see what those key indicators are for that person and how valuable the content is. So to get that, we have to have a strong persona base. Oops. Next up, we need a content mission statement. And the way I think of this is like we need a chalk outline that only one type of content could fit into. And so when we're looking at it, we need to say, my mission is that we're going to build a a group of content for audio consumption that will be pushed out over Audible and traditional podcast apps to reach a market of truck drivers who are sitting in their cab all day with fun and entertaining content. So now we've provided an outline, and when somebody comes up with an educational white paper they want to convert into somebody, would read it and record it, it doesn't fit, right? Because it's not fun. And so we have to not consider that piece of content. So the idea behind that mission statement is to keep the team together and working on the same type of content. And then when things change, we go back and make the changes to our mission and then see what still fits in our archive to see if we need to refresh it to bring it back up to that consistent voice. And so mission is very important at that point. And then we have the roles of an Agile team, which are completely different than the roles of a traditional marketing team. I've changed the names from what would be traditional Agile development, but we have a content owner. The idea of a content owner is that they are the person responsible for making sure there's a stack of content that's always prioritized. And at the top is our most prioritized item, and it has the most details. And at the bottom is the stuff that's not as high on the priority, but they are constantly adding to it, changing it, and adapting what we're doing based off of what they're seeing in the audience. So they don't necessarily have to build content. They don't have to manage the team. But they do need to have a good understanding of what the audience is looking for, because priority is key whenever we're trying to build something that grabs attention. Next, we have a Scrum Master. And when Agile came out, most of it wasn't American, and we love rugby so much that everybody would know what a Scrum Master is, so we picked terms that match, right? No, nobody knows what a Scrum Master is. Nobody understands what rugby is, but the idea is when you see them all in the big huddle, they're not just like talking to each other, and they're not just trying to catch breath. They're deciding what the next play is, and they're going to execute that play through the huddle. So the Scrum Master is the one who's running out the calls. And so we need somebody in our team that's doing that, that's looking for the issues that are arising, that are watching the team's performance, that are listening to what the members of other departments are saying when it comes to requests. We have been in marketing, the arts and crafts department forever, and now we have to stop that. And so we need somebody to stand at the door and say, sorry, get in line, let's listen to what you need, and let's prioritize it based off of a need. And so the Scrum Master fills that goal. Luckily, if you've got a software team, you probably have one of these in your company, and they would love to think about something else besides software for a while. So bringing them up to speed would be awesome. And then you have content developers. You don't have social media people, you don't have writers or graphic designers, because guess what? Those are all skill sets we have to learn if our team truly requires them on a regular basis, that we have to cross-train each other. We have to come up with the idea of a Renaissance marketer, somebody who can do a lot of things really well. And so that's where a content developer fits in. So they produce the content. So we got these ideas of things that we want to create and the things that we're going to build in our next content marketing effort or our big campaign that we're pushing out, and those get stacked up to the top. And at the top, we have an individual content item. And on that item are a list of fields that are very beneficial to help you ensure that you're building the appropriate type of content. You have a title that is not a headline, that is not something you worry about forever. It's just what you're calling it internally. You have a story, and this story helps you identify the need and the value that you're going to create. Because we all in this room could say, hey, let's take 10 minutes and figure out what the best social media tools are, and let's write a blog post on the top, let's say we need an odd number, top 9 social media tools in 2018, right? That's going to be awesome. We're going to do so much SEO on it. It's going to be brilliant. However, if we did market research, we'd realize there's like 1 billion of those already, and the value wouldn't be that high. And so by defining the story ahead of time, to saying, as this persona, I need a particular thing about something so that I can define that value statement, do some research, find out, are you going to be the best place on the internet for this particular thing? Are you going to provide somebody actual value? And then once you have that story idea laid out, now we need a list of ways we're going to do it. We're going to create a video. We're going to do some research. We're going to write some content so we can understand what the team dynamic is. And then we have a call to action. What are we wanting our person to do afterwards? This could be sign up for our newsletter, or it could be actually take an action on their own to continue their education or to share it with somebody else. And then a little tiny thing up here is called an estimate. And this is going to rock everybody's world. And everybody who's creative is going to start crying, but we'll get through it. Out of this big item, we're going to break it down into smaller tasks, individual things that we can work on a daily basis. So we don't have to break everything down to that level, but we want to make sure we have a solid thought going through there. So don't worry about breaking those down into individual pieces of work. So as we said, in this process, now that we've created this item, figuring out where it sorts to is very important, because if you release something too early, or if you release something too late, your audience's attention might move away. If you start talking about the Oculus now, you're going to get a bunch of early adopters. Do you want early adopters? And what type of content do you want? If you don't want early adopters, you might not talk about this right now to your audience, right? You might talk about something else. So that's where that priority is key. And then that estimate we were talking about. So many times have I seen creative teams, and it's really not the marketers and the writers. Most of them come from agencies, so they overestimate everything, where they're like, it's going to take 2 hours to write 800 words. It's like, that's going to be the worst 800 words we came up with. What would you do if I gave you 8? You're like, whoa, 8? To write, I get all day? It's like, is it going to be more valuable? Is that what they want? Yeah, we need all day. And then how long is it going to take us to build the graphics that go along with that? How long is it going to take us to render the video? And all of that starts to come into this art of estimating. And you can see this sequence up here is slightly off, right? We're missing a few cards, and there's a reason for that. Because if I tell you, hey, what's the difference between, is this going to take a day or 2 days? That's a pretty big number, right? There's 1 of 1 and then 2 of 1. And so you can tell that difference. But if I say, you got 12 or 13 days, which one do you want? It's so far out, and it's hard to quantify something when it gets bigger that you need a gap. You have that gap of uncertainty. So sometimes we need to go a little high, and sometimes we need to go a little bit low, because we're estimating, we're forecasting in the future. If you think of the weather guys, when a hurricane comes up, they say, hey, Florida, hey, Texas, it looks like it's coming here, and oh, New York, if it swings out here. But when it gets closer to the coast, these people stop getting alerted, and we start to know who needs to take shelter. And that's the same way with estimating. Except for in Kansas City, we got this one guy named Gary Lezak. Every single day he's wrong, and then he comes out and says, new data. And everybody's like, oh, Gary got new data in. And he could be 20 degrees off, and it's okay. And no one else has that job. So now we need the ability to work. We have to sustain this. Just because we have all these estimates and know what we're going to work on next, most of our marketing teams don't have the concept of isolation, that they can work on something and continue to work on this for a set period of time, like a week, right? They just don't get that ability. Things change all the time, and so they have partial work on many different types. And so we need the ability to lock out that, if it could be 10, 15, 5 days, whatever it is, set a goal, figure out our resources, who's available, and why are they available for only a short time. If you have a new person, maybe half of their time is spent learning the process, the other half of the time is committed. Or they're working with, George and Sally are working together, so they're paired up to learn from each other. Maybe this guy's a video editor and he's teaching somebody about video editing. It's a great technique for learning, but we take their time and we split it out. Whatever it is, we have less resources than we just would think by going with 15 days. And then once we get that total amount of resources available, we are not all effective 8 hours a day. We have meetings, we have water coolers, we have Facebook to check, we have long lunches, so we figure out what the true efficiency factors are of our team. How many hours are working? Usually 6.5 is what I find. And so once we apply the math to there, now we know we have 28 points available for these 4 resources in that 15 days. And we look back at our backlog and we start to count down. We say, okay, this was a 5, we pull it out, now we got 23. This was a 13, we pull it out, now it's a 10. We didn't have a 10, so is the next one an 8? Can we pull it in? Is it 2 5s, whatever it is? We pull those in based off of that, and that gives us a pretty good estimate and understanding of what our team can commit to. And over time, as you continue to do this, and you repeat this process, this number gets more certain, and these numbers get more certain. And people start to be cross-trained, and it doesn't matter who's pulling it up, they can do the simple task of keeping the machine running. And so we get more consistent. And now, if you know we produce 28 points of assets on a 15-day cycle, when somebody says, what's your ROI on the content? Now we can go look at our content. We can track where we can to see where there's growth in mail list or sales or whatever it is that we're measuring. And we can say there's 10 pieces of content that, and over the year, they provide this much value. And it takes our team this long to produce a piece of content, and the resource cost for this is 20,000x. So now we know that the return on investment was $100,000 of gain for $20,000 of resource per piece of content. You have solved that missing link of marketing when it comes to building assets, how much things can cost, and how much a resource, how valuable a resource is. So when you say, I need another content developer, you have the numbers, you have the figures to go back and to share that insight with somebody, and that's all they've ever wanted. Prove to me that investing more will give us more, and marketing just never has nailed that. So daily, once we get this first sprint going, that's the term of sprint, the time box, we run a stand-up meeting. The idea behind a stand-up meeting is everybody who's accountable for this sprint will come up here to a board, and we have 3 columns. One is all our open items and tasks. One is the things that we are working on, and these are the things that are done. And so first person walks up and says, today I'm going to work on this item, and I should be able to get it done today. And the Scrum Master says, great. Any issues? Nope. Next person comes up and says, well, he's working on that, so I'm going to do the research on this one, and that will take me a couple days, but we should be able to get it out. And you keep going around the team, everybody's done. The next day, you have the same meeting, except for now you've got this middle column you're addressing. You say, yep, I got that done, and I'm working on this one today. No issues. The other guy says, I'm still working on this one, but we're squared away. And maybe the third one comes up and says, somebody came by my desk, was bugging me all day, or I got pulled away on something else and I didn't get that done. And that gives you that heat point, that disruption that's happening that the Scrum Master then needs to address, because the team committed to getting this done, and now we have an issue there. And we just don't see that unless we meet regularly to discuss the items on the Scrum board. Now, you could take this to the extreme like me and my wife have. She's a certified Scrum Master, so at home We have touchscreen computers with Scrum Boards, and if we're going on vacation, we build a Scrum Board, and the kids come up and they say, okay, I started to pack my clothes, I've done my laundry. But on the priority stack is not the chargers for their phones. That's at the bottom. We need that to be the last thing they do, because if it's Monday and they're like, we're leaving Friday, I put my phone charger in here, then all of a sudden we're going to have issues. So you can take this everywhere you want to go with an Agile process, but the same concepts are the same. You may hear a term called Kanban. Close your ears until you've been doing this for a few years. This is great. This is what happens when developers get to run the house. In most of your IT teams, developers are running the house. They're saying, oh, we got to update to the latest version of this because it does the same thing as the last version did, but it's new. And that's how they come up with processes like this that allow things to go back and forth, and you take this imaginary time away, and you can get zero done and still look like you're making progress. But you'll see it, and it does have its benefits. But we won't talk about that today. Finally, once our sprint's done, we can relax. We have this retrospective. We could say the goods and bads of what happened in the process, the goods and bads of the team members. Be careful on this one. Make sure nobody gets hurt. Smiles, praise sandwich. You were awesome at this. You sucked at this. You were awesome at this. Makes everybody feel good. Do it out at lunch so you have a full belly, but have a retrospective. You have to talk about some of the stuff honestly and be prepared for HR to be brought in. Then you're going to have this planning and review where we're going to repeat the process. We're going to look at the backlog. We're going to change any estimates and priority based off of what we've learned and what we've adapted to, and then we continue to do this for the rest of our lives, or at least as long as we're on that marketing team. So let's get into some important failure points and then take some questions. First place is most people on creative teams have not measured their workload ever. And so it's like a buffet. You get up there and you're like, oh, that looks awesome. 2 crab rangoon, of course. And then you're like, General Tso's, and you're like, oh, wow, there's even more. And your plate's got stuff all over it. It's not going to taste good anymore because you mixed all the flavors, but you just keep loading up. That's the idea behind our workloads, too, is we just keep saying, oh, yeah, totally, bring it on. Let's do it. And stuff starts slipping, our priorities change, and we start to forget work. So we have to become really good at measuring our work. And I say go back today, lay out the rest of your day on some simple task, put it up on a wall, and then move them when you get it done. And then at the end of the day, you're going to have this sense of refreshment because you're going to see things done. And you go home and feel accomplished. And the next day you come up and you got a clean slate and you write the new tasks that you're working on that day and you move them throughout the day. And when something else comes up, you don't work on it. You create a task and you prioritize it, and then you say, okay, now that I added this, I have to take these off today and put them in a backlog, and this is what I'm working on the rest of the day. And so at the end of the day, you truly have that, I got gold stars, and so I'm going to go home and brag to my mom, and we're going to go get free pizza tonight because you did the work, and you feel good about it. You don't just have the looming backlog sitting on your shoulders. Remove disruptions. Find out where the talkers are and the people who are moving around and taking up 15 minutes here and there. Find the places where you can buy headphones and busy lights and different things to give to your team so that they can isolate themselves out from the rest of the people. Buy Sonos for the office and say, hey, you guys can control the music in the office, because when the team unites around the music, they also unite about the chatter. At the same time, there's so many things that you can do to remove the current disruptions that are going on. Most of the time, it's people outside of the department coming through and talking to everybody and interacting with everybody and adding tasks to everybody's list, and that's where that Scrum Master will start to get in front of that and not let it happen. Then you have to move into small steps. You can't deploy this whole thing out day one. You have to look at the personas, start there. Get your backlog going, start to estimate, and just take little tiny baby steps like Bill Murray did in What About Bob? And then at the end, you'll realize that you are fully agile. You have this whole system, and you've done it in a way that fits for you, so when new members come on your team, you can walk them through the whole process and bring them up on your system because you took the time and you didn't just blank copy and replace with something somebody else did. Define what done is. People will leave debt behind. Nobody likes the walk of shame. I love it. As a business owner, I love seeing my developers come up here and go, I didn't get it done, because it's like, I didn't have to yell at them. The team looked at them, and that yelled at them, and so that was good. But we need to know, like, when we create a blog post, what do we call done? Like, what are the criteria? How many eyes need to review it on a piece of, like, a graphic? What's the size of the different dimensions we need? What's the quality that we need that we would call done? So that way, when somebody does move it all the way over here and we're finished on the item, we can look at this checklist and say, yes, this meets the quality criteria of our blog post. We can ship it. Because rather than doing the walk of shame, somebody would go, yeah, I got that done. And behind their back, they're holding that extra content they're going to finish later tonight, but they're going to forget. And so that's where the definition of done comes in to help us alleviate debt. Beware of secret doubters. There are people that will smile at your face and say, I'm on this, but behind the scenes, they're thinking, this is change. I don't like change. I'm going to do whatever I can to break this. They're everywhere. So beware of them, and that just means that make sure you're doing a test with everybody on your team, that you're sitting down with them, you're watching what they're doing, you're getting that feedback. You've made a place where feedback is good, and you try to convince them that this is the best approach. And sometimes there will be things in Agile that you don't like and your team doesn't like anymore. Just get rid of them. Take them out. We need our team to work. But make sure you truly know that everybody's on board with this, or you'll have this behind-the-scenes mutiny happen. And so the last step is build that endurance. Make sure that as you take this off, this is something that you can start to repeat. This is something that your team can handle when somebody goes out on vacation for 2 weeks, that you're not stuck in the water, that you've adapted, and that you've been able to continue to release that content regularly. And that's the presentation. If you want the slides, you can email me, but love some questions if you have any.
So Jeff, when teams are just getting started, you can do a lot of things individually to kind of help, especially with the board and things like that. Mm-hmm. But when teams are trying to get started, what are some of the things to implement the Scrum side of things in order to kind of get going?
So I say keep it paper as long as you can. That paper, if anybody heard of Redgate software, if you're a developer, IT people, they are like the database software kings of the world. And in their office in the UK, they still use paper. And you're talking about 200 developers. Every window of this like third and fourth floor in a building is covered in Post-it notes. And it's great. Paper works. It's cheap. You can get started today. You can run out. The problem that they found is, like when the cleaning crew comes by and they're vacuuming and somebody scrapes the board, they knock something from the open status down, they go, uh-oh, put it in the closed status, right? So now all of a sudden we've had change that wasn't implemented by one of our teams. That's when paper starts to fail. But if you adopt software, every piece of Agile software out there has some really bad pieces to it. Jira is far too complex to build. Every single new project has new templates. TFS is so software-driven that it doesn't feel right for a marketer. And then anything that's ever been marketed as an Agile tool truly isn't an Agile tool for marketing. And so getting used to the paper process first is a great way to get started. Plus, we know from research and science that when people touch things, they own it, they feel that they're a part of it. That's why if you ever go to like a tourist spot and the people are standing out there trying to get you to buy something, they're trying to get you to touch it, because if you touch it, then all of a sudden when they take it back, they took something from you, and so you want to buy it, you want to get it back. The same thing goes with the process for owning something, for saying, yes, I did that, I get accomplishment, I get the gold star. And clicking a mouse and dragging something over doesn't give you the same feel. And so that's one thing. And then making sure that you have regular lunch and learns for the process, and then also other things that we're learning. I think once a week as you're getting started is a fine pace. And you're maybe doing one Agile lesson a month and then 3 content lessons a month. The idea of marketers learning to grow in their craft is not something that a lot of people execute on. If you go to Content Marketing Institute's videos on YouTube, they get hundreds of views, and there are millions of marketers. So that should show you how many marketers go out and, you know, consume educational content. It's really low. And so we have to start adopting teams that will have a place and a time that is, you know, dedicated for education and learning about all the things that go into an Agile process, not just the Agile steps. Other questions? Yeah.
What's the elevator pitch for upper management that you would give to say, hey, my marketing department really needs this, and here's why?
Yep. I would say, first thing I say is, any day if I could have a room that you'd walk into and see what the status is of our project, would you love it? And they say, absolutely. And if I say, what if I had dashboards already ready and green lights and red lights that you could see when we're on schedule? And they say, great. And I say, if I can align that to our other reports we're giving you, would you like that? Absolutely. And usually that's enough to get them started. And then you start to invite them to the meetings. Because if this is the first time they've seen Agile, if they come in the room, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, you know, VP of something I've never heard of is in here, and you're moving stuff around, but they're like, that is so awesome. They go back and they get jazzed about it, and they start to tell other people about it, and then you have more and more coming down to see the progress happen, because for the longest time it's just this factory burning smoke, but you couldn't look inside to see what they're making. Now you can actually get in and watch it being done and listen and hear the feedback, and then when they ask a question, they might be able to interject. And that makes them feel good, being able to share something of value to a team that's going to use it and create stuff. So from the executive side, usually that's the buy-in that they want, the insight into it and the numbers coming out of it to make sure they made a good decision. But I've seen entire organizations, like I was the only person on a project, and they started to come in and watch me do my daily stand-ups, which are weird because I'm the only one in there. And then after that, they give me a team, and I bring the team, and then within 2 years, the entire organization is Agile. They have product owners instead of product specialists. They have Scrum Masters all over the organization. They look for ways to implement Scrum because they've seen the power of it, and they've seen good deployments, and they've seen increased efficiency, and they've got all these books and resources that says, this is not something for software. This was invented for manufacturing. This is a business process. And then, you know, the guys from Six Sigma are all implementing Agile ways. So all this stuff is starting to become something that they're comfortable with. Other questions? Yeah.
I have a specific one. So under slide deck for estimation, you had different resources essentially at different days allocated for your sprint.
Yeah.
Do you see that kind of that adjusts per resource, and then also what's your take on dedicated resources versus non-dedicated resources and fluctuating?
Sure. I think the more you split a person, the more, just like anything else, the more it's split up, the more friction it gets between the pieces. So by splitting person from one project to two, you're going to get an inefficient time of like 15 to 30 minutes. And it's any time they're bouncing back between there. That's why you never disrupt a developer when he's got his headphones on. You turn around, right, quickly. Don't catch his eye. Because if you catch his eye, he's like, I'm done for the next 10 minutes. I'm going to be surfing YouTube or doing something else. So I like to keep resources dedicated as much as possible. But I'm also realistic to know that we've got people who have majors in things like video editing that a lot of teams need. And so we have to split those resources up. But anytime we have that, in Agile, we have this term called bus factor. How many buses does it take for us to not look when we cross the road, surfing on our phone, to take out our team? And so if one bus comes by and hits the video guy, all of a sudden, are we out of business with it when it comes to video? And so we want a high bus factor. And it's crude, but it's software developers, and that's what they do when they have Mountain Dew in them. So you need to figure out, maybe we can cross-train, bring that resource down, and let somebody else sit in with them to learn how to do the basics. And you think, oh, I can't do video editing. Yes, you can. All those teenagers on YouTube are using high-end systems to do it. You just haven't had the training. And there are things that you can do that aren't super complicated that can be prepped and templatized and made possible to get into. And so there's always a way to do it. You just have to learn what that is. It could be using Camtasia instead of Adobe Premiere, and that's an easy tool to get started. But you got to figure out like why those resources are being split. Now, if you're an agency, usually it has to do with billable time and client expertise and things like that, and that's because you're an agency, so now you have to implement a different process of billing. And guys, we've implemented it, and then other guys have implemented the idea of point-based pricing, where you sell the points to your customers rather than selling the hours, and you sell by the sprint rather than sell by the big project or the feature, and then that lets them make changes, and they're using software so they can see both sides, and then you can reprioritize things, and they have a good idea of the fixed cost going forward, and you have the ability to let your client change stuff because we all know they're going to. So it's a model, you just got to figure out how to adapt it.
So how do you make this work if you have a large team that's scattered, and so everything's virtual, which is what we have?
So Adobe uses Agile marketing, and they're all over the place. And so there is this has been a problem for software developers, and they're scattered all over the place too. And so we can look and glean what they did. And they came up with the idea of a scrum of scrums. So you have teams that are broken up based off of either a product or maybe an audience. I love audience-based teams in marketing because it doesn't matter what the product is. If you think of like Microsoft and the audience of office workers, well, they're going to sell the Surface, they're going to sell Office 365, they're going to sell all these things to the same person. It's good for them to mix the content up and to share something valuable to that. Same with like developers, like mix them into the audience. And so once you have that, then we have things that are changing in the different audiences, but we have this bigger consortium of when we change the process, we get everybody together, and then we make a higher meeting of the people who are implementing this across the organization. When it comes to the daily meetings and things like that, you figure out the time zone, when's the best time, but it doesn't have to be at the beginning of the day. It could be at the end of the day over here. You just need a time that we can all get together once a day and push the updates. And if we can't, then we need to think of a way that this team's assets, once they produce, roll into this team's backlog, and then allow them to prioritize that and push it out. Because we can't have them be related to each other, but they're waiting for this team. So if you think of like a compliance team in your marketing department, and we've written this and we've got to run it through compliance, well, at this point, it's finished. We move it over here, and somebody puts it on the compliance backlog. But any remaining task after that have to be on another backlog item, because I can't assume they're going to get it in a 24-hour turnaround. And so that's why we continue to ship what we can, and we put stuff on other people's stacks, and they get to it when they can, and we communicate about the priority. And so that would be a way to do it, especially if you had a large video team, and you had, like a lot of organizations now, they'll have like entire studios in their organization, and they'll be running videos all day. Well, we're not going to pull one guy out and say he's on this team and one guy out and say he's on that team. We're going to treat it like an internal agency, and we're going to ask for things to be put on the backlog, and then when we get it back, we're going to prioritize and work on it. And so we just start to work into functional silos that are agile in nature. But it's not easy, and it takes a lot of communication and time, but no committee meetings, just good meetings that are stand-up meetings. If we can, we stand up during our meetings, because if you're sitting down, you'll talk about the golf match you had yesterday. If you're standing up, you're getting tired, and then make everything. Once it's over, adjourn the meeting. Don't like fill up the 30 minutes.
Yeah, I'm in healthcare, we call them huddles.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
15 minutes tops.
I've had to present in front of doctors at 6 a.m. just because that's the time for their huddle. And so it's definitely works really well in healthcare. Other questions?
You said that personas are a part of one of the cards.
Yeah.
So I know everybody's kind of all across the board with how they implement personas. So what information is like the most priority thing to put in there in order to successfully do this?
It depends on every field. And that's why the only thing I say is name And that's the only requirement is a name because we need to call this person a something. But when we pick gender, I pick the opposite of what the norm is. So if I'm going for truck drivers, I'm picking a female truck driver because everybody thinks truck drivers is male. But we have an RV, so we get to sit higher and we travel all over the country. There's a lot of female truck drivers. The trash lady that comes through our neighborhood is a lady because, and she's got clean hair and dressed well because it's the robots that pull the thing in and out now. And so you don't think of somebody that can lift a 100-pound bag and move it over. So the ideas of the stereotypes that we're getting into all have to shift because we're trying to reach the broader audience and we're trying to not make those decisions. But then beyond that, it's what matters to our industry, what matters to the person, and what are those areas that we're going to, if it's B2B, how do I make them look good to their boss? Because that's every decision's made, like, am I going to lose my job or keep my job? How do I look good on my job? So if I'm pulling in an agency, those are the problems. What are they facing? What are they challenged with and tasked with? They're far more important than age and title, because most agency people will think we got to get to the CMO. CMO's never made a decision about a content management system. It's usually somebody down here is just tired of it and they start to Google search to look for something else. And so that's that persona we need, not the rubber stamp at the end, because somebody else has already done the work to get there before that point. But yeah, it's
But required.
yeah. So if you're a healthcare industry, so one of my clients, they like to advertise at sporting events all over the place. Behind the Royals game, you might see their title. Behind, the Speedway, you might see their title. But if you think of like the average person that makes the call when something bad happens, usually not the dude watching the baseball game. If it's in my house, I go, oh, I don't know what happens. And my wife comes out in beast mode and grabs the kid and runs to the car and she's picking the hospital where to go. So we need to make sure our target persona on that type of engagement is somebody who actually does the work and not just somebody we think would do it. Not to say that women aren't into baseball or speedway stuff, but you find different ways to reach them. Cool.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Well,
Jeff.
email me any questions, and as you get started, if you email me as well, I'll send you a free copy, PDF copy of my book on Agile marketing, which kind of outlines even more of this stuff, and then we'll get you running. Thank you, guys.
This is what it looks like.
Ooh, you got it.
I do have it.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's 300 and, the number, Jeff?
No, I put extra space. I'm the type of person that highlights the crap out of their books. And I always I'm a shaky hand or something, so I added a little bit more space between the lines to make sure you could highlight what you want and not everything.
All right, so we have a raffle that we're going to do. We have the book Connect. This is does anybody have this? Do you? You already know that? Okay. Yeah, I know you do. So this is written by Lars Berkholm-Peterson, Ron Person, and Christopher Nash of Sitecore. And so these guys were the founding members of the Sitecore Business Optimization Strategy team. So a lot of this is going to be obviously related to Sitecore. How do you manage the Sitecore? That's a great book. We also have this nice little rounded tube mug, because that's what I had.
Slash planter. That would be a very nice planter.
And let's see. Do you want to?
Pins. There's
I
pins.
don't know. Do you want to give away a
Oh,
book?
that's your book.
That's my book. You'll get a copy from Jeff. Don't worry. Yeah.
Everybody gets.
I'll not go as far as giving away that book just yet.
There's this pretty bag over here too.
The pretty Sitecore, but whose Sitecore bag is it?
Billy.
Is Billy's?
Not, I found it. It's pretty, yeah.
Billy's favorite bag.
Can you give it to him?
I do not. I don't have a Sitecore bag yet. If you guys would like some promotional items from Sitecore, please do that. I can work on that.
So Anne Marie was 2 months, okay, cool.
It had me out in California most of the time, becoming Sitecore framework, so. Don't know a lot yet, but I do know that symposium's coming up. It's in Orlando, it's the Dolphin Bay Resort. I know this is a learning forum.
No,
so.
please.
So yeah, so it should be really good this year. They're making some big improvements, and I don't know if you have kids, you might want to schedule a trip to Disney around that too. I've actually stayed at the Dolphin, was it Dolphin and it was Swan and Dolphin. That's what I did.
Yeah, great. So we're thankful to have him in the St. Louis area now.
Yeah.
It's great. And thank you to Jeff. We appreciate, again, coming all the way from Kansas City.
Yeah, 4 a.m. in the morning on I-70. That's a good one.
And just real quick, I just wanted to plug his, again, for enterprisemarketer.com. Phenomenal resource here that Jeff and his wife Michelle has put together. And he does podcasting, like he said. He does video on there. He goes to the conferences. He's gone to the conferences here in St. Louis multiple times, all across the country. And it's really cool. Go there. He'll set up shop and actually have the marketer-to-marketer conversations. It's really insightful. He has some of the best and brightest marketers on that, the podcast, on the video channel and everything. So phenomenal resource.
We're getting ready to
Go
release
there.
another series. We have 9 hosts for a new show called Explicit Content. And so we're going to get into the areas of marketing that make you pump your fist at the air. And we'll have shows on social media, content marketing, digital marketing, and team dynamics, native advertising, and SEO.
Wow.
People like Andy Crestadina, Damian Ross, Melanie Diesel, lots of big names in the industry on the show.
Right. So a Sitecore developer moving into the marketing arena. I mean, you've been in the
They
marketing
should.
arena for a long
Absolutely.
time. They should. Yeah,
Best way to get empathy is to actually do the work, because
That's right.
it's hard to truly understand what a customer is going through until you actually put the shoes on.
Sure. Well, thank you again. This is every month, so I'm not sure if it's going to be at Watlow every single month. They're just gracious enough to have this awesome space. They did the ribbon cutting 2 weeks ago, and brand new facility for them. It's just an amazing space. So hopefully next month it'll be here. But every month when we do these, this is the marketing track, and we do a technical track on the following months. So we just rotate, okay? So, next month we'll probably do something on, I think a lot of things are coming out about artificial intelligence and using Alexa and all this kind of stuff. We may go down that road, not really sure yet, but, we'll release a schedule and, promote that out and everything. So, otherwise, we're at time. So, thank you so much for joining us.